Hello and welcome. Today we are going to look at the most underrated commanders for each color or color combination. And let's start right away with Odric Master Tactician to explain what we're doing today. So Odric Master Tactician is our white commander that is most underrated because he only got 935 decks on EDH but he is actually a very interesting commander because Odric and if Odric and at least 3 other creatures attack, you choose which creatures block this combat and how those creatures block. So with your creatures you can then make sure that your opponents block unprofitably, and this is actually such a game warping ability that you can actually go into combat very easily against your opponents. Maybe have something with, well, not often Death Touch, but maybe you have something stronger or with First Strike or something that your opponents can't profitably block something and win the game through attrition that way. So it's sort of a removal type of deck in a weird way, but you need to attack with your creatures and you are mono white, so you're actually behind already. But I think this is actually a very interesting commander and it should be a bit more popular. Then Akal Pakal, the first among equals, who is from Ixalan, actually a pretty new commander, which is a little bit special for this list. But our blue commander, the thing it does is look at the top 2 cards of your library on every turn. And then you put one of them into your hand and one into the graveyard. Now I say every turn, but it says at the beginning of each player's end step, if an artifact entered the battlefield under your control this turn, you get that ability. So you will need a lot of artifact flash cards, or a way to give your artifacts flash, or maybe a way to create an artifact token on your opponent's turns, so that you can trigger that ability over and over, and then you will be drawing 4 cards and putting 4 cards into your graveyard every time, which can then of course be a way to get all of those artifacts back, which is actually something artifact decks often like to do. So I feel like this is very perfect for an artifact commander. It's just in mono blue and you could get up to 4 colors for this color or for this theme. For black I chose God Eternal Bantu, which definitely has almost no decks made for it, but I think it is actually very interesting. The thing is, it has an ability on it that is not often that useful in Commander, where when God Eternal Bantu dies or is put into exile from the battlefield, you may return it to its owner's library 3rd from the top, and it's actually very dangerous to do this with your commander, because sometimes you just lose your commander into your deck and you don't get it back at all. Thing is, it's 5 mana, so you will be able to play it once, maybe twice. Usually you won't be able to play it 3 or more times. So once you have done it twice, maybe you can choose to put it into your deck anyways, and you can actually use that ability. Plus, you don't need to use every ability on a card. For example, Bantu has Menace. If you never get to use it, that's fine. But sometimes you do, and that's okay too. Now, the real ability we are interested in is when Bantu enters, sacrifice any number of other permanents, then draw that many cards. Now this says enter, so you can get it back from somewhere, or maybe bounce it, put it back, or something like that. That also works, but you actually want to play your commander multiple times, and it's 5 mana, so that is a bit hard to do. But black can be good with mana, and the fact that you draw that many cards means that you could perhaps later on use Bantu again, but you should be able to win the game, I think, if you have sacrificed maybe 10 or more cards throughout the game and drawn 10 cards. And this is actually pretty easy to do, so I really like it because of it. Now Jaxis is my choice for red. Jaxis is a little bit more popular. It also has a bit more of a pronounced ability, where you can tap this 4 mana commander to discard a card and create a token of another creature you already control. So you need to have played another creature, and then you can create a token, and it will have the sort of blitz ability where it has haste, and when it dies you draw a card and you have to sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Now you only get to use this as a sorcery, which is, I guess, fine because you want to attack with those creatures anyways. Thing is, you can copy some very big things with Jaxes. And also you could blitz in Jaxes and immediately do this for just 3 mana, if you don't have a way to give them haste. So Jaxes can be very good with some staples that are a bit cheaper, but if you can find some mono red or colorless things that are actually really big, you can definitely make a dent into your opponents. Now another God Eternal for green is Ronas, and Ronas is actually very basic in a way. Ronas same abilities basically as Bantu, but Death Touch instead of Menace. And then when Ronas enters, you double the power of each creature you control until end of turn, and they gain Vigilance. Now, doubling power and toughness is something green has been known to do. It can do it multiple times. Now, this is actually very interesting, because if you double something and then you double it again, that's a very high number for most creatures. But I feel like the Vigilance is a bit underrated too, because Vigilance allows you to attack and defend at the same time, and many green creatures do not have Vigilance, especially the big ones, so you will have to swing with them and then be lost afterwards. Now, you might not think it, but this is actually a sort of value commander in that way, because your opponents will have to block your creatures to survive. And then your opponents might not have a board, you will, and then you can go on, ramp some more, and maybe attack another time. Thing is, I think you should actually win with God Eternal Ronas once you play him, so you should have a fine board, maybe some tramplers, maybe something that has 10 power and you double it twice, and you can win the game that way, or at least kill some opponents. I think it's a really good aggro commander. Now for the jewel colored cards, these actually have a lot of options too. I started in Wooburg order again, starting with Azorius, where Danry Klin, Editor-in-Chief, I think has been overlooked in some way. Because this Cat Advisor, when it ends the battlefield, you get to choose to put a +1 counter on it, a first strike counter on it, or a vigilance counter on it. After that, whenever a non-token creature you control enters the battlefield, if Danry has counters on it, you put the same number and kind of counters on that creature. So that means if you can put a first strike, vigilance, +1 counter, trample counter, I don't know what we have, but there are a lot of cool counters, maybe indestructible or shield counter on it. You can make sure that you put those counters on non-token creatures you control when they enter the battlefield. So you get to strengthen your creatures very much, and then afterwards you don't even care that much if Danry Klin gets killed, because your creatures already have those counters. It also says the amount, so if you put +1 counters on Danry and then proliferate a bunch, or put more +1 counters on Danry, you get to put the same amount on the other creatures. This can be very strong if you have a deck full of smaller creatures. For Orzhov, we have Naem Shai Murat. I really don't know how to say, but it's a Warhammer thing. This is a Reanimator commander, where your opponents get to choose what creatures you get back. So this is actually less strong, but I think it is a very fun concept. There is almost no one playing this commander, so I think it is very easily underrated. And the thing is, you need a bunch of things. So you have a 3/3 without other abilities, with which you need to deal combat damage to a player. Thing is, you can be a little bit political with it, because you may have that player return target permanent card from their graveyard to their hand. So they will get a thing from their graveyard back, so maybe you can attack them and make sure that they get a deal with you, and you can get a little bit political in that way. If you do allow that creature to return target permanent from the graveyard to their hand, that player chooses a permanent card in your graveyard and you put it onto the battlefield. So it is a little bit skewed in your favor, because you get it onto the battlefield and they just get it into your hand. Now there's multiple ways to play this. You can play things that are maybe not that good, so that your opponents will be incentivized to not block. Or you can play things that are always very good. In this case, you will need a bunch of creatures that are just too good and they will win you the game, and no other creatures. Orzhov is actually very good at this in this color combination, having no creatures, because you can use a lot of board wipes, a lot of removal, and you will be able to control your opponents that way. Maybe they won't even have a creature to block with and they don't have a choice in the matter. So you might not even need to get political in this deck. Now, Eowyn, the Fearless Knight, is the Boros commander I chose. This commander enters and then you exile target creature an opponent controls with greater power. Now this is not that interesting, it's just removal, but legendary creatures you control gain protection from each of that creature's colors until end of turn. So you will need something to remove, but then your creatures will gain protection from those colors. This also means that your creatures can become unblockable. Now the fact that there's less than 200 decks made with Eowyn I think is very interesting, because giving your creatures protection from a color can sometimes mean you can get in with all of your creatures against that opponent. And I think this is just a very good finisher in that way, which you can add to a Boros deck. Now you will need other ways in Boros to get your value and your other stuff that you need. So in that way it isn't that strong, but it can be a very fun aggro commander. Stormwind Rider is my choice for Celestia, and it's a new one, so it's a little bit cheaty, but it hasn't been made a lot this month either. It now sits at just over 600 decks, but I think this could be way more popular. It's a 4-mana commander that says creatures with flying can't attack you or block creatures you control. This means that if you can make sure that all of your opponent's creatures have flying, you will be able to attack them. Plus, they won't be able to attack you. Now, how will you do that? Well, the second ability says whenever you cast a spell that targets one or more creatures, those creatures gain flying until end of turn. So basically, by targeting your opponents, you are almost goading their creatures. So you can, for example, target your opponent's creatures and make sure that they attack your opponents. You could deal it with them in that way, but maybe if you give them flying and a bunch of extra power, they will be incentivized to kill your opponents anyways. And what can you do, right? Well, if you have enough creatures in your deck that do have flying, or you don't and you give your creatures flying because you target them, you can then later finish your opponents anyways, because they won't have flying unless you want them to have it. Or if they have creatures. Atris, Oracle of Half-Truths, is an interesting commander. It doesn't seem that strong because it is usually used in the 99. But this is actually very classical Dimir, I would say. So when the Oracle enters, target opponent looks at the top 3 cards of your library and separates them into a face down and face up pile. So usually they will put 2 in one and 1 in the other. And then you put 1 pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. Now I have seen people deal with other people and make sure that they get all 3 for some reason. Maybe they need to defeat another opponent or something like that. But usually it's 2 in 1. And then you get to choose whether you pick the cards you can see or the cards you can see and guess that those are good, or well, otherwise you wouldn't choose them. So this is actually interesting because you have a commander that's 4 mana. When it enters the battlefield, you get to draw a bunch of cards. Now this can be interesting with Blink, because then you can blink Atris, let the Oracle enter the battlefield again, and then draw another 2 or 1 cards. Or you could use this as a reanimator commander where you don't care if your opponents put the cards into your graveyard. If they put it into your graveyard, you'll get them back anyways. Now you can do a bit of both too. Or you can build it around a control shell and make sure that this is just extra value and you are controlling your opponents and then comboing off later. I think this is a very versatile commander and it should be played more. Sapphire and the Tempest is a 7-mana commander that doesn't get mana reduction. This is very hard to play, definitely in Izzet, but if you can get there, maybe you don't need to care that much about your commander's cost anymore, because Sapphire and the Tempest enter, and then once during each of your turns you may cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand without paying its mana cost. Now this means if you can, for example, play an extra turn spell, you can then go off infinitely, maybe. This is very interesting. Or you can just play Sapphire as a big mana commander, and then the 7 mana isn't that high of a cost if you can play a spell that's, for example, 10 mana. That's a cost reduction actually. But you need to get there, and thing is, with Izzet you can make a lot of treasures, and you might only need to get there once to get enough value to then be able to play it twice. Now for Simic I also have a 7 mana commander. In Simic this is a bit less weird because in green you have a lot of ramp. Now Tishana is my choice as the Merfolk commander. That becomes stronger for every number of, for the number of cards in your hand. You also have no maximum hand size, so Tishana could basically become a 99/99 if you want. Or more, because your commander deck isn't limited, I think. So when Tishana enters the battlefield, you draw a card for each creature you control. So you want to go white, you want to ramp a bunch, and then you will draw a bunch of cards, and that's just it. I think this is perfect for a Simic commander, because you want to draw a lot of cards, and you want to ramp, and now you only have to focus on the one with your deck and the other with your commander. Rakdos the Defiler is, I think, very interesting. It's a 6 mana Rakdos commander, so again, hard to play, but maybe you can win the game with this. Because when Rakdos the Defiler attacks, you sacrifice half the non-demon permanents you control rounded up. So do make sure that you have enough demons so that you don't have to sacrifice all of your cards. Perhaps you do want to do that and you can make him into a sacrifice commander. Now, the second ability is whenever Rakdos deals combat damage to a player, they sacrifice half of the non-demon permanents they control, rounded up. So that means that they get to sacrifice a bunch of things too. Now, if you can make sure that you, for example, steal those cards because they had to sacrifice them or something else like that, you have a very strong commander in this sense because you are stealing all of your opponent's stuff. It's at least a lot of chaos and a lot of fun. Definitely, if you're a Rakdos player, you will like any Rakdos card. For Golgari, I have Storef, the Divkaran Lich, which is from War of the Spark, I think. Whenever they deal combat damage to a player, now this is actually easier to do because it's a 5/4 with Trample, or Planeswalker, you return to your hand target creature or Planeswalker card in your graveyard that wasn't put there this combat. So that means that you can't put it there, put a creature back because it died during combat this turn, or you milled it during this combat or something. But you can get something else back. That means that you can reanimate something strong from your graveyard, and this is actually a great reanimator commander because of it, I think. Now you will need to make sure that you have enough things in there that are strong. Now, thing that is also interesting is that you can return to your hand target creature or Planeswalker. So maybe this is very good to use in a Planeswalker commander deck, where this will allow you to put all those reanimating black and green Planeswalkers back into your hand, with which you can then reanimate other stuff. For Gruul, I have Grand Warlord Radha, which is a great Gruul commander because she says whenever one or more creatures you control attack, you add that much mana in any combination of red and green, and until end of turn you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. Now this means that you will need to go white, and then you will create a bunch of mana, and then perhaps with that mana you can make sure that you can attack again, and in this way you can go infinite very easily, and I think that is why this is a great aggro commander and a great extra combat commander on top of that, I think, because of it. For 3 colors, I'm starting with Esper with Nihilor. I really don't know where this guy is from. I think it's Dungeons and Dragons. This is a horror in Esper that says when he enters the battlefield, for each opponent you tap up to 1 untapped creature you control, and then you get to gain control of the creature if it has less power than the creature you tapped. So you need to tap a stronger creature, and then you get to steal your opponent's creatures. Now also, whenever you attack with a stolen creature, you gain 2 life, and the player that owned it or controlled it, well, the player you stole it from gets to lose 2 life. So it's salt to injury, and I like that. And you can play all of your favorite steal your opponent's stuff cards, which I really like, which you will also later see in this deck. So I think this is a great commander and a bit overlooked, underlooked, maybe that. Now, the face of Bo, which is from Doctor Who, might not be your flavorful favorite thing, but is very interesting mechanically. Now, I've chosen for mechanically interesting things over anything else. This one taps, and then you may cast a spell with Suspend. For its Suspend cost, activate only as sorcery. Now, this is interesting because there are some very strong Suspend cards, and they are usually like 7, 8 mana, something like that. Shall we say 6 or 7, maybe 10 even. And you can cast them for almost free, maybe 2 or 3 mana, or 1 even sometimes. So this is actually very good if you can play them immediately. And often you can, for example, on turn 5, if you don't even give the commander haste or anything, play an 8 mana creature. And I think that is not even stretching it. For band, I have chosen Rubinia, or let's call her Rubin, Soul Singer. And Rubin, you can choose not to untap. Maybe this is something interesting to you already. But you can also tap Rubin to gain control of target creature for as long as you control her, and she remains tapped. Now, you can steal some interesting cards from your opponents. You can choose when you will be giving them back, and you can keep them if you choose as well. Now, this is interesting with other stuff that steals things. Again, I really like that apparently. But you can also perhaps choose to untap Rubin and then sacrifice the previous one, kill all of your opponent's stuff and go on that way. It doesn't really feel that bad if you are doing it that way, but it can be very strong. For Mardu, I've chosen a new one, which is actually from a precon. Usually these get really popular, but this one didn't get that popular. Thing is also, in Mardu I didn't find any non-popular commanders that are actually interesting. But let me know if you think I didn't find something interesting that I should have found. Now, this one has been played for 2500 or has been made in 2500 decks, but still I think it should be more popular because it's only in rank 950. Nerif, when it enters, creates 2 1/1 red goblins, and whenever Nerif attacks, you exile a number of cards from the top of your library equal to the number of differently named tokens you control. Now, this is interesting because usually things don't really care about the different names on your tokens. Now, do mind that if you have a 1/1 goblin and a 2/1 goblin, this doesn't really change things. They are still not differently named, but you can make a bunch of tokens and then exile a bunch of cards, and then during any turn you attacked with a commander, which will be Nerif, you may play those cards. This is, I think, very good and very fun because you will want to make a bunch of different tokens. Do note that you will need to get the tokens, because otherwise this can be a very annoying deck to play if you need things to represent all those tokens. Maybe you like drawing stuff and you can do it that way. For Absan, I chose XL, the Scion of Atraxa. Thing with this one is people don't really like the toxic mechanic or the infect mechanic because it wins the game too soon. Other thing is, I think you should win the game. So XL is a 2/5 flying vigilance creature with toxic 2. This means that you can attack your opponents and then defend against their creatures and still inflict toxic on them. Then XL has the ability Corrupted. This ability means that if you give your opponents 3 or more poison counters, you will get another ability. Now, for XL, this means that at the beginning of your end step, those opponents, it actually said it on the card, exile the top card of their library face down, and you may look at and play those cards, so also lands, for as long as they remain exiled. And you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells, so you can also cast red or blue spells. This is actually very interesting. You are again stealing your opponent's stuff, but you will be able to, at your end step, draw 3 cards. This is, I think, very strong, and I think very fun that you can still finish the game with those poison counters if you need. Any Flash is my Naya choice. Now, Any Flash when she enters, if you cast it, you return target permanent with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. This means you can return basically anything. And then the most interesting thing, when any flash becomes tapped, you exile the top 2 so that you may play those cards this turn. So again, you can play lands, but you can also play other stuff. And maybe you are able to tap any flash over and over. Now, the fact that this is a 6 mana commander, usually I would not advise, but it is in green, so you can pretty easily get to there. And it will be pretty interesting. Also, you can immediately tap any flash after you've played her, so you might be able to ramp immediately after you have played her, and that just means that you will be able to play her next turn again. Parnes, or not really ramp, but get a land. Parnes, the Subtle Brush, is a 5 mana Grixis commander, where whenever you or a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability you control, you counter it unless they pay 4 life. So that's basically ward, pay 4 life. And whenever you, but also for you, and whenever you copy a spell, up to 1 target opponent may also copy that spell, and they may choose new targets for that copy. So you're helping your opponents. Why? Because if they target something of yours, they will lose life. So eventually they won't be able to cast it on you, and you will be able to force your opponents to cast the things on your opponents or other opponents. This means that you can keep them in a chokehold, and I feel like that's just very flavorful for Grixis. For Sultai, I chose Felix 5 Boots, which actually hasn't been played. It is still pretty popular, let's say that. It is in 6,000 decks on EDH, which puts it on, in rank 454. Now, thing is, I think this should be more popular because ninjutsu is also so popular, and this actually feels more like a ninjutsu commander than anything else. Even the things with ninjutsu on them. If a creature you control dealing combat damage to a player causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, so not only its abilities but also other things, it triggers an additional time. So the doubling of things has been popular for a little bit, I think a few years ago, and I think this is one of the most interesting things that happened. Maybe the Mardu one that works with combat triggers is a bit more interesting, but this one just works very well with ninjutsu and also other things that allow you to draw a bunch of cards. Now, weakness in this deck is that you draw a bunch of cards, but there aren't really many other abilities in there, so do make sure that you have some other things than drawing cards as well, or do make sure that you don't have a maximum hand size. For Teamer, I chose PNLR, the Chief Mechanic. This one has been overlooked because people didn't like Ether Drift. Now, energy decks, there are a lot of commanders that do it. This one says whenever one or more artifact creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you get 2 energy counters. This is actually the most interesting thing about the commander, because that is a very easy way to get a bunch of energy counters, and with that you can do a bunch of strong things. The other ability is slightly interesting, but not the best way to spend your energy. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay 1 or more energy, and then if you do, you create an XX vehicle artifact named Nalar Etherjet, with flying and crew 2, so PNLR can crew it, and where X is the amount of energy spent this way. Now, if you do have 20 energy and you can make a thing like that, that is very strong. But otherwise, I think you will look at other cards that love to use energy to make this commander very strong. For Junt, I have chosen Corvold. Not your Corvold, no, Gleeful Glutton. This is an 8 mana commander. It is in green, but that's still way too much, right? But it has the ability to become cheaper for each card type among permanents you have sacrificed this turn. So sacrifice a creature and an artifact, and this already is just a 6 mana commander, which is still too much, but you can probably get this to, let's say, 4 mana. And then it becomes a really strong commander, because whenever Corvold deals combat damage to a player, you put X+1 counters on Core Vault and draw X cards, where X is the number of permanent types among cards in your graveyard. Now, as you have probably already 4 or 5 of those permanent types in your graveyard, you will get to draw 4 cards and put 4 +1 counters on Core Vault, which is almost the same as the regular Core Vault because it can go off very easily with sacrificing. But I think this is maybe even extra interesting because it works so fast. And the normal Core Vault is really popular. So for 4 mana, well, there aren't often very good choices. So I've chosen Yidris for Grixis, but it's just because I don't have many other good choices. So let's honestly skip this one. There are not a lot of non-white 4-color commanders. Now, for Saskia the Unyielding, I have chosen as the non-blue commander. I think this one is also still very popular in rank 300. But maybe should be a bit more popular. 4 colors is very fun to play, and whenever a creature you control deals common damage to a player, it deals that much damage to the chosen player, and you choose one player when Saskia enters the battlefield. Now this means that you create a threat mechanic, which can be very fun in some play groups, where sometimes there's just a little bit too much of politicking, and your politicking will kill your opponents, so it's a lesson. For Blacklist, I have chosen Crystal, which is a new commander, so it hasn't been built a lot, but I think this will be very popular anyways. I think it should be more though. So whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Crystal deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of colors that spell is. So in this deck you will be trying to play things with 4 colors, and Crystal will then deal 4 damage to each opponent for every one of those spells you have played. This is very strong, and it is also able to grant you that red, green, white or blue mana depending on what you need. So very useful. Now this was an easy choice, but still not it's still in the top 100, Atraxa Grand Unifier, because the other Atraxa is just even more popular. So yeah, I won't go over this one, but we probably also won't go over Breya because it's also very popular in the top 50 even. So yeah, for the 4-color commanders, I really didn't have too many choices. Now this one is also new, so we can touch on it a little bit. It's a 5-color commander that I think should be a bit more popular. Carolina Dean, Runaway, says at the beginning of your first main phase, you add Wooburg as your mana, and you can't spend this mana to cast spells from your hand. So it works with exiling things, but then you can play, for example, a 5 mana card, or you could play you can play a 5 mana card, but you could also play a Wooburg card, which is also often very hard to do, and in this deck you will only need the red mana. It is an uncommon commander, but I think this will be a very cool one to play around with, and might actually be more in the spirit of 5-color than anything else. For colorless, I also went with one that is played a bunch, but it's in rank 400 something. It's Karn Legacy Reforged. This 5 mana artifact, which is hard to get to in colorless, has power and toughness equal to the greatest mana value among artifacts you control. So that means it will probably be a 6/6, a 5/5, something like that. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, you add a colorless mana for each artifact you control, meaning you can very easily play the bigger artifacts. So once you have it out on the battlefield a little bit, you will probably get this to become a what's the biggest one? 11, I think. So it will become very strong, very big, and also you get to play those 11 mana artifacts if you get to untap with Karn. Thing is, you need to play it on artifacts because the mana can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells, but you can use it on abilities. So do mind that. You also don't lose the mana as steps and phases end. Now this was it for this video. I'd like to know what you think about this, and if you would like to see another one a few years in the future, because there will be a lot of new commanders and a lot of things that we have forgotten about. Now I'd like to thank you for watching again, and I wish you a very nice day. Bye.